Most of the planet is theoretically reachable if you have enough money, time, and tolerance for misery, but theoretically is doing a lot of work in that sentence. There are places on Earth that require months of planning, extraordinary expense, significant physical danger, and sometimes government permission that simply will not be granted, and a handful that require all of those things simultaneously. These are the 15 impossible to reach places on Earth you didn't know. Number 15, Gangkhar Puensum, Bhutan. Gangkhar Puensum, at 7,570 meters, 24,836 feet, is the highest unclimbed mountain on Earth. A distinction it holds not because every attempt has failed, but because Bhutan closed its mountains above 6,000 meters to climbing in 1994 out of respect for local spiritual beliefs that mountains are the residences of deities. A lightweight expedition reached approximately 6,900 meters in 1986, the closest any party has come to the summit. Since the government ban, the mountain has been inaccessible by policy rather than by physics, which is its own kind of inaccessibility. Bhutan itself is not easy to visit in the first place. The government mandates a minimum daily spending requirement for all foreign tourists, a sustainable development fee currently set at $100 per person per day, reduced from $250, and all visits require a licensed Bhutanese tour operator and government approval. The combination of entry restriction, the 1994 climbing ban, and the mountain's remote location in the northern border region near Tibet makes Gangkhar Puensum genuinely off-limits in a way that most summits are not. The mountain sits there, unclimbed, and specifically intended to remain that way. Number 14, the Darien Gap, Panama and Colombia. The Pan-American Highway runs approximately 30,000 miles from Prudhoe Bay, Alaska, to Ushuaia, Argentina, the longest road in the world, connecting the entire hemisphere, except for one section. The Darien Gap is approximately 100 miles of roadless jungle and swamp in the Darien province of Panama, and the northwestern corner of Colombia, where the highway simply does not exist, and where the terrain has defeated every serious effort to build it. The Darien Gap is not unreachable by foot or by boat. People cross it every year, including the tens of thousands of migrants making the journey toward North America in recent years. But crossing it under any circumstances involves approximately 5 to 7 days through dense jungle, swamps, rivers, and mountains, with no road, no reliable infrastructure, no emergency services, and a documented history of criminal activity. The combination of narco-trafficking, armed groups, and the physical extremity of the terrain make it one of the most genuinely dangerous continuous landmasses accessible to an ordinary traveler. People who cross the Darien Gap on purpose, adventure travelers, researchers documenting the crossing, and the very few people who have completed the full Pan-American highway route on motorcycle or foot, describe it as an experience that combines genuine physical beauty with sustained, unambiguous risk. The jungle in the Darien is extraordinary. Old-growth rainforest, rivers, wildlife, including jaguar and harpy eagle, indigenous communities that have managed the terrain for generations. It is also consistently dangerous in documented, specific ways that have ended badly for people who did not fully account for what they were entering. The road almost certainly will not be built in any meaningful time frame because the combination of political opposition from the indigenous communities who live in the gap, environmental opposition from conservation organizations protecting what is one of the last intact sections of the Central American land bridge, the technical and financial cost of the construction, and the Colombian government's concern about increasing trafficking routes through the region has created a permanent stalemate that planning documents cannot resolve. Number 13, North Sentinel Island, Andaman Islands, India. North Sentinel Island is a small island in the Bay of Bengal, approximately 72 square kilometers, about 28 square miles, that is home to the Sentinelese, a people who have maintained complete voluntary isolation from the outside world, who respond to contact attempts with hostility and whose population is estimated somewhere between 50 and 500. That wide range is not a failure of research. It is a reflection of how little can be known about a community that has successfully refused all outside contact and whose island cannot be approached legally or safely. The Indian government formally acknowledges the Sentinelese' right to self-determination and has maintained a non-contact policy since 1996. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands Protection of Aboriginal Tribes Act prohibits approaching within 3 nautical miles of the island. The policy exists not only to protect the Sentinelese' chosen isolation, but also because the Sentinelese, having had no exposure to the diseases that mainland populations have built immunity to over centuries, would be catastrophically vulnerable to even minor infections introduced by outside contact. A common cold brought to North Sentinel Island could be a fatal event for a significant portion of the population. The Sentinelese have communicated their position through every means available to them. In 2006, 2 fishermen whose anchored boat drifted too close to the island while they slept were killed by arrows. Their bodies were placed on poles above the waterline, visible from the Coast Guard vessel that attempted recovery. The Indian government did not attempt to recover the bodies or prosecute anyone for the deaths. In November 2018, American missionary John Allen Chow paid local fishermen to bring him within range of the island, made several approach attempts over 2 days, was shot at with arrows during the first attempts, and was killed on his third. The Indian government declared there was no case to prosecute. The Sentinelese were acting in defense of their own territory, and Chow's body was not recovered. The island is one of the few places on Earth where the specific barrier to access is the stated, demonstrated, and legally supported will of the people who live there. The 55,000-year continuous habitation estimate places the Sentinelese ancestors among the earliest modern human populations to have left Africa and reached the Andaman Islands. Number 12. Snake Island, Ilha da Queimada Grande, Brazil. Ilha da Queimada Grande is a small island off the coast of São Paulo state in Brazil, approximately 33 kilometers from the mainland, and it has the densest population of venomous snakes of any landmass on Earth. The snake in question is the golden lancehead pit viper, Bothrops insularis, a species found nowhere else in the world, whose venom can cause tissue death and hemorrhaging, and who are present on the island at an estimated density of 1 to 5 per square meter in certain areas. The golden lancehead evolved in isolation on the island with no mammalian predators and with an available food source of migratory birds, a combination that produced a snake population of extraordinary density and a venom optimized for rapid prey immobilization. The Brazilian Navy maintains a lighthouse on the island and is the only entity with legal access. Scientific researchers require special authorization from the Brazilian government, IBAMA. The island is otherwise closed to all visitors, and the combination of the legal prohibition and the ecological reality make it comprehensively inaccessible. The island's snakes are critically endangered. The golden lancehead is listed on the IUCN Red List, and illegal poaching for the exotic reptile trade has reduced the population from historical estimates, which is the only way anything about this island could be considered an improvement. Number 11. The Mariana Trench, Western Pacific Ocean. The Mariana Trench, in the Western Pacific Ocean, east of the Mariana Islands, reaches a maximum depth of approximately 10,935 meters, 35,876 feet at the Challenger Deep, the deepest known point on Earth's surface. To put that in context, Mount Everest, at 8,848.86 meters, would fit inside the trench with over 2 kilometers of water above its summit. The floor of the Challenger Deep is in complete darkness, in water near freezing, under pressure approximately 1,086 times greater than standard atmospheric pressure at sea level, roughly 15,750 pounds per square inch, which is sufficient to crush a human body instantaneously without containment. The number of people who have physically reached the bottom of the Challenger Deep is, as of 2025, approximately 30. A number that compares strikingly with the approximately 7,000 people who have reached the summit of Everest. The first crewed descent to the deepest point was the Swiss-designed, U.S. Navy-operated bathyscaphe Trieste, which descended on January 23, 1960, carrying Swiss engineer Jacques Piccard and U.S. Navy Lieutenant Don Walsh. They spent approximately 20 minutes on the bottom at approximately 10,916 meters, observing through the viewport that marine life existed even at that depth, a finding that was surprising at the time and remains remarkable. The next solo human descent came more than 52 years later, when filmmaker and explorer James Cameron descended in his custom-built deep-sea Challenger submersible on March 26, 2012, reaching approximately 10,898 meters. Cameron spent approximately 3 hours on the bottom collecting samples and footage. In 2019, Victor Vescovo's 5 Deeps expedition, using the DSV limiting factor submersible, dove to 10,928 meters in May 2019, becoming the deepest crewed dive in history and one of a series of 5 Deeps dives that mapped the deepest point of each ocean. The limiting factor is engineering at an extreme. The submersible hull must withstand pressures that have defeated conventional materials and designs across generations of oceanographic engineering. The cost per crewed dive to the Challenger Deep is in the millions of dollars, and the number of vessels capable of making the journey can be counted without running out of fingers. Number 10. The Federated States of Micronesia. Chuuk Lagoon Deep Access. Chuuk Lagoon, formerly Chuuk Lagoon in the Federated States of Micronesia, is one of the most significant underwater archaeological sites in the world. The lagoon contains the wreck of the Japanese Imperial Navy's 4th Fleet, sunk by the American Operation Hailstone in February 1944. Approximately 60 ships and 400 aircraft lie on the lagoon floor, many at depths between 15 and 60 meters. The lagoon is accessible to recreational scuba divers for the shallower wrecks, which is why it is famous in sport diving circles. The inaccessibility issue is the deeper wrecks and the surrounding political and logistical context. Reaching Chuuk requires a minimum of 1 to 2 connections from Guam or Hawaii with limited flight schedules, and the island infrastructure is minimal. The FSM as a whole is one of the least visited sovereign nations on Earth, not because it is legally restricted, but because it requires a level of deliberate, logistically complex planning that places it effectively out of reach for the vast majority of travelers who might want to visit. The deep wrecks in the lagoon, at 60 meters and beyond recreational diving depth, are accessible only to technical divers with specialized equipment and training, and the combination of remote access to the island and technical diving requirements makes the full extent of the site essentially unreachable. Number 9. Vatnajökull Glacier, Iceland's interior ice cap. Vatnajökull is the largest glacier in Iceland and one of the largest in Europe, covering approximately 7,900 square kilometers, nearly 8% of Iceland's total land area, with an ice cap that reaches depths of up to 950 meters. The glacier covers active volcanoes including Grímsvötn and Bardarbunga, and the subglacial volcanic and geothermal activity creates a landscape that is simultaneously ice-covered and geologically alive. The interior of Vatnajökull, away from the glacier's edges, which are accessible by tourist infrastructure, requires significant expedition planning. The central ice cap is accessible primarily by snowmobile or in highly specialized vehicles during winter conditions, and even with appropriate vehicles, the terrain presents genuine challenges. Crevasse fields, whiteout conditions, extreme cold, and the constant possibility of subglacial volcanic activity that can produce Jökullaups, outburst floods of water from beneath the glacier that move with extraordinary speed and force. A Jökullaup from Grímsvötn in 1996 produced a peak discharge of approximately 45,000 cubic meters per second, more than the Amazon River. The glacier's interior is regularly accessed by research teams and by well-equipped expeditions. but for an ordinary traveler, it is as effectively inaccessible as any place in this list. Number 8. Socotra Island, Yemen. Socotra Island sits in the Arabian Sea approximately 240 kilometers off the eastern coast of Yemen and 80 kilometers from the Somali coast, and its biological isolation is among the most complete of any inhabited island on Earth. The island separated from the African landmass approximately 6 to 7 million years ago and has been evolving its plant and animal communities in genetic isolation ever since. Approximately 1/3 of its plant species and a high proportion of its reptile species are found nowhere else on Earth. The landscape of the Hagir Mountains Plateau is defined by dragon blood trees, Dracaena cinnabari, whose umbrella canopy and dark red sap create a visual environment that has no equivalent elsewhere. UNESCO designated the Socotra archipelago a World Heritage Site in 2008. The island has been inhabited by the Socotri people for millennia, and the Socotri language, a South Arabian language with no traditional written form, distinct from Arabic, is spoken by approximately 60,000 people, making Socotra a place of both biological and linguistic uniqueness. Access before 2015 was difficult but achievable. Limited flights through Yemen combined with minimal but functional tourism infrastructure on the island. In 2015, the Yemeni civil war began, creating a security situation that has made Yemen, including Socotra, effectively unreachable for conventional visitors. The island has been contested between Yemeni government forces, UAE-backed southern separatist forces, and has experienced UAE troop deployments that the Yemeni government contested as occupation. The humanitarian consequences of the broader Yemen conflict are among the most severe of any contemporary crisis. The UN has described the Yemen war as one of the worst humanitarian disasters in the world. As of 2024 and into 2025, Socotra occasionally receives tourists through restricted channels, but the combination of civil war instability, limited transport access, and security uncertainty makes it one of the places on this list where the barrier is genuinely political and dangerous rather than merely logistically difficult. Number 7. The Tibetan Plateau Interior, Changtang Region. The Changtang Plateau in the interior of Tibet, in China, is one of the largest, highest, and most remote wilderness areas on Earth. It covers approximately 1.8 million square kilometers at elevations averaging 4,500 to 5,000 meters, higher than the summit of Mont Blanc in the Alps, with winter temperatures reaching -40 degrees Celsius and wind conditions that make the landscape functionally uninhabitable for most of the year. The western Changtang is home to the Tibetan wild ass, Kiang, Tibetan antelope, chiru, wild yak, and the snow leopard at population densities that reflect the region's inaccessibility. Access to Tibet requires a Tibet travel permit issued by the Tibet Tourism Bureau, a separate permit from the standard Chinese visa, and individual travel without a guided tour is not permitted. Additional permits are required for protected areas and for areas near the border with Nepal and India. The Chinese government periodically closes Tibet entirely to foreign tourists around politically sensitive dates. Even with all permits, reaching the deep interior of the Changtang requires the kind of expedition logistics, specialized vehicles, fuel caching, weather windows, emergency communications, that make it accessible only to fully equipped expeditions. The combination of political restriction and physical extremity puts the true interior of the Changtang in the same category as the polar regions for practical inaccessibility. Number 6. Zone of Silence, Bolsón de Mapimí, Mexico. The Zone of Silence is an area of the Chihuahuan Desert in the municipalities of Ceballos and Jiménez in the Mexican state of Durango, roughly defined by the intersection of parallels 26 and 27 north and meridians 103 and 104 west. The area has attracted decades of speculation about electromagnetic anomalies, radio signal disruption, and unusual phenomena. some of it traceable to the documented crash of an Athena rocket launched from White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico on July 11, 1970, which went off course and landed in the desert, requiring a U.S. military recovery operation that drew attention to the area. The inaccessibility is practical. The area sits in one of the more remote sections of the Chihuahuan Desert, with limited roads and limited water. It is within the Mapimi Biosphere Reserve, established in 1977, which provides some environmental protection. Scientists have documented unusual concentrations of meteorite fragments in the region, and the area contains the Bolson de Mapimi dry lakebed. But the electromagnetic anomalies claimed in popular accounts have not been scientifically documented. The zone of silence is reachable by determined travelers with appropriate desert logistics, but the combination of remoteness, lack of infrastructure, extreme heat, and the absence of any formal tourism infrastructure makes it effectively inaccessible for the vast majority of people who might be curious about it. Number 5. Motuo County, Tibet, China. Motuo County in the Tibet Autonomous Region of China was the last county in China without road access until 2013, a distinction it held among a country with approximately 4.8 million kilometers of roads, which is itself a statement about the severity of the terrain. The county sits in the Yarlung Changpo Gorge, which reaches depths of over 5,000 meters from the surrounding plateau to the river, the deepest gorge on Earth by most measurements. In a region where the Himalayan peaks to the north and the Hengduan Mountains to the east create a geographic enclosure that kept road builders at bay for decades. The road that now connects Motuo to the outside world is subject to seasonal closure from landslides, floods, and snow, and the construction required engineering solutions that remain vulnerable to the extreme rainfall the gorge receives, the same moisture that supports the extraordinary biodiversity of the area, including subtropical plants at the feet of glaciated peaks. Before 2013, access to Motuo required crossing high mountain passes, suspension bridges over the Yarlung Tsangpo, and multi-day trekking through terrain that could be impassable in wet conditions. The indigenous Adi and Monpa communities of the gorge were genuinely isolated for most of recorded Chinese history. The road's construction ended one category of impossibility. The gorge's regular landslide closures create another. Number 4. Poveglia Island, Venice Lagoon, Italy. Poveglia is a small island in the Venice Lagoon between Venice and the Lido, reachable by boat from Venice in approximately 15 minutes, proximity being precisely the irony of its inaccessibility. The island has one of the longer documented histories of enforced human suffering of any landmass in Italy. It served as a quarantine station during the Black Death in the 14th century. It was fortified as a military installation in the 18th century. It was used again as a bubonic plague quarantine site in 1793 and 1805, when plague ships arriving in the Adriatic were redirected to Poveglia and their occupants confined. From 1922 until its closure in 1968, it housed a psychiatric hospital. The accumulated dead from the plague periods alone is estimated in the tens of thousands, and the island's soil has been reported to contain a high proportion of cremated human remains from the mass burials conducted during the epidemic periods. The Italian government owns the island and maintains a strict prohibition on public access, officially because the decaying 19th and early 20th century structures present genuine physical danger to anyone entering them, and because there is no administrative function that justifies maintaining the buildings or managing visitor access. In 2014, when a proposal to lease the island for hotel development was advanced, the Italian parliament voted to block it, maintaining both the prohibition on commercial development and the effective closure to the public. Poveglia is physically 15 minutes from one of the most visited tourist destinations in the world. The Venice Water Taxi Network could deliver you to its dock in a quarter hour. The boat trip is trivial. The access prohibition is not. The combination of accumulated historical weight, structurally compromised buildings, and the specific tenacity of Italian bureaucratic restriction when it decides something is closed creates a category of inaccessibility that is neither physical extremity nor legal danger. just an island that the relevant government has decided you are not going to visit. And that is sufficiently correct about this, that you are not. Number 3. The Kamchatka Peninsula interior, Russia. The Kamchatka Peninsula in the Russian Far East extends approximately 1,200 kilometers southward from the mainland Siberian coast into the Pacific, containing 160 volcanoes, 29 of which are active. Vast wilderness, one of the densest brown bear populations on Earth, an infrastructure that reflects its extraordinary remoteness from the centers of Russian government and commerce. Access to Kamchatka requires flying to Petropavlovsk, Kamchatsky, the peninsula's only significant city, from Moscow or other major Russian cities, a flight of approximately 9 to 10 hours. From Petropavlovsk, the peninsula's interior has almost no road network. Reaching the Valley of the Geysers, one of the largest geyser fields in the world, second only to Yellowstone in terms of geyser concentration, requires a helicopter because there is no other way in or out. Helicopter access is expensive, weather-dependent, and limited by availability. The specific quality of Kamchatka's inaccessibility is not legal prohibition, but infrastructure absence at scale. The peninsula is approximately the size of California. The road network is approximately the road network of a small town. Everything else is accessible only by helicopter, by small boat, or on foot, with the appropriate attitude toward brown bears. The Kamchatka brown bear can reach 700 kilograms, and the peninsula has one of the highest densities of the species in the world. As travel writer and Kamchatka expedition participant Pam Flowers described the experience, you realize quickly that you are not in a wilderness that tolerates you. You are in a wilderness that has not noticed you yet. Number 2. The Heard Island and McDonald Islands, Australian territory. Heard Island and the McDonald Islands are an Australian external territory in the southern Indian Ocean, approximately 4,100 kilometers southwest of Perth and approximately 1,630 kilometers from Antarctica. They are among the most remote, permanently active volcanic territories on Earth. Heard Island's Big Ben is an active stratovolcano at 2,745 meters. The McDonald Islands have experienced significant volcanic activity as recently as 2001 that has changed the island's area and topography. No permanent human population exists. The Australian Antarctic Division manages the territory and controls access through a permit system. Reaching the islands requires either chartering a vessel capable of making the approximately 10-day voyage from the nearest port or being part of an officially authorized scientific expedition. The weather in the southern Indian Ocean at these latitudes, the roaring 40s and furious 50s, produces seas that make the voyage consistently challenging and sometimes impassable. The number of documented landings on Heard Island since its discovery in 1853 is in the dozens. Not thousands, dozens. The wildlife, which includes the full suite of subantarctic species, elephant seals, fur seals, king penguins, macaroni penguins, and numerous seabirds, in a completely undisturbed environment, exists in an isolation that has been maintained almost entirely by the impracticality of getting there. Number 1. Bouvet Island, South Atlantic Ocean. Bouvet Island is a Norwegian territory in the South Atlantic Ocean, and it holds the specific distinction of being the most remote island on Earth by the calculation that matters most: the maximum distance from any other land in any direction. The nearest land is Queen Maud Land on the coast of Antarctica, approximately 1,700 kilometers to the south, uninhabited wilderness. The nearest inhabited land is Tristan da Cunha, approximately 2,600 kilometers to the north. The nearest continental coast is approximately 2,500 kilometers to the east, southern Africa, and over 3,000 kilometers to the west, South America. In every direction from Bouvet Island, you are looking at open Southern Ocean for a very long time before you see anything. The island itself is approximately 49 square kilometers, covered almost entirely by the Vatnajökull Glacier, which reaches heights of approximately 935 meters at the volcanic summit. There is no harbor, there is no protected anchorage. There is no airstrip, no permanent population, no facilities of any kind beyond the automated weather station. Approaching the island requires navigating Southern Ocean seas that are among the most consistently hostile in the world. Norway has claimed the island since 1928 and designates it as a nature reserve. Permission to land requires Norwegian government authorization, which is granted rarely and for specific scientific, research, or expedition purposes. The specific detail that has given Bouvet Island a disproportionate presence in discussions of unsettling remote places is an event in 1964. A British naval vessel conducting a survey in the area found an abandoned lifeboat on the island, intact, with oars, a fuel drum, and some supplies, in apparently usable condition. There was no record of any vessel having reported distress in the vicinity. There were no bodies, no survivors, and no indication on the island of where whoever had been in the boat had gone. The lifeboat's origin and the fate of whoever it belonged to were never determined. Norwegian authorities investigated within the limits available to them. No explanation was produced. The mystery remains unresolved in the historical record. The few documented landings on Bouvet Island since the 1920s number in the dozens across a century. Radio expeditions, scientific missions, a handful of mountaineering attempts. Each requires months of planning, a vessel capable of the voyage, a weather window in the brief southern summer, and then an approach to an island with no natural harbor, landing through surf onto whatever accessible shoreline can be found, usually in challenging sea conditions. If there is no accessible landing point, the expedition returns without setting foot on the island. This has happened. 15 places, some legally sealed, some physically extreme, some both, and one that simply has an abandoned lifeboat of unknown origin sitting on it. The geography of impossibility turns out to have quite a lot of variety. The interesting ones are almost always the ones where the reason you cannot get there is the most specific. Hit that like button and subscribe. More content like this coming.